And welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 163. And today we're going to be doing something about card evaluation. I thought that it would be a nice episode to sort of ease us into the new format. We are at this stage where we are looking at what's going on in the Spider-Man set slash universes within set with different names. And we're trying to figure out which cards are going to be good, which cards are going to be bad. And every format is, of course, different, but we still can have some lessons from previous sets. And that's what I'm going to be trying to do today. I'm going to try to look at extreme cards and extreme in multiple categories. So it's also a sort of best of or worst of episode at the same time. Okay, but as always, we start with a small preamble. And this time it's very linked to the general topic. So specifics of the format will make you win more in that particular format. Knowing which cards are important, knowing super teensy-wincy interactions, this is what will make you great in the late format. But adapting to a format is one thing, and general adaptability is a different thing. There are some players who can be given a set that they never played, shown the spoiler for half an hour, and they will be much better in it than someone who doesn't have the general adaptability. And I think part of general adaptability is being able to draw more general trends, to know the fundamentals, to have a certain skill set of card evaluation that is built on multiple sets, on experience. And this is what we're going to be focusing on today in this particular episode, because I want to look at, are there general trends that allow us predicting certain cards? Now, don't get me wrong. There will always be exceptions. There will always be specific format that rules don't apply. But this is the thing with heuristics. They only work 80% of the time, and 20% of the time are useless. But the first thing to do, especially when you're gathering this early skill set, is to know them and know to apply them. And in the early days, if you apply them 100% of the time, you're going to be much better off than applying them 50% of the time. As you get better, you will know how to spot the exceptions. You will know how to quickly learn that something is an exception. And, this is certain element of your development as a Magic player, as a limited player, as a drafter. But especially when you're starting, it's good to at least know that those heuristics are there and roll along with them while you gather enough skills to know when to question those heuristics. So why do we want to use the lists? Well, first thing that is nice is that people like lists. I do like lists myself. As I was a child, I was making my own charts with my brother, and we were comparing them. Before content creation was a thing, we were creating a content that went straight to a drawer, and probably it's somewhere in my parents' attic still living there, gathering dust. But making lists is the low-hanging fruit of content creation. It's relatively easy to make. You can do the top 10 commanders that are also turtles, put it on YouTube, and you'll get some views out of it. It's relatively popular and relatively easy to do. And there is a good reason for that. People like lists and they like listening to them. They like ranking things. But apart from the fun factor of it and the easiness of making them, I think that making lists in an organized, systematic way can also help you finding some trends. It can help you seeing some tendencies. And it can be both in terms of the card power, strength, but also it will show the tendencies of our behavior. As much as we want to think of ourselves as very unique individuals that are not like anyone else in the world, which is true, we are also part of a species that has a certain type of brain, and that brain will tend to make similar mistakes over and over again, because it's still the same monkey it's still the same brain that the monkeys on the savannah had 2 million years ago, and it still makes the same shortcuts in a much more complicated world that we're living in. And because of that, we often will end up in trouble. And, it's the worst of our problems if that trouble is misevaluating a specific type of card. But by looking at cards that are maybe evaluated much higher by our collective brain of 17 lands users, we can see some tendencies of what particular mistakes our brain is more likely to make. And this is what I'm going to start with, traps. And the first thing we're going to look at are cards that are the biggest traps, which means that their tier is D plus or lower. And by the way, the tier in this particular case is based on the win rate. This normalized win rate I was talking about, when you put everything to 50%, cards that are below, let's say 48%, are going to be in the tier D plus or below, according to the distribution of the win rates of all the sets that I analyzed. But they will have low alpha. And as you should know by now, by listening to me, low alpha means that the card is picked very highly. So, card that is not winning, it doesn't deliver the performance, but somehow is still appealing to the players. So why do we want to play those particular cards? And I'm going to go with the list of the cards. You see the graph from the beginning, but only the last name is appearing on the graph. For those of you who are in Twitch chat while we're recording, this is your time to try to guess which cards you think are going to be on that list, and we'll see if you get some of them. For me, I'm going to maybe talk through every card that we are looking to and try to find what is specific about them. Galta Stampede Tyrant is number 12 of the biggest traps that I've calculated. And it's 8 mana, legendary creature, elder dinosaur, 12/12, trample, so big. And when it enters, you can put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. And it has also of 2.2, which means it's picked like in the first 3 picks, basically. But it has a low win rate. And part of it is probably it's a 8 mana big creature that doesn't do much. Because by the time you have 8 mana, how many creatures can you have in your hand? What is the benefit of putting them into the play? Obviously, this card was designed to cheat it into play somehow, and then splurge your hand in some kind of a combo constructed deck, but not a card for limited. And some might say, well, 8 mana, 12/12 is not nothing, but it's not easy to get to 8 mana, and you better make those 8 mana count. There are much better cards. Like Arden was also an 8 mana card, but this thing made a lot of things happen on the turn it hit the board. This one has to survive the whole turn. You have to untap with it, and then maybe it will do some damage, and not that much even, because probably if we were in that situation, there are some blockers. Maybe they even can trade off with it, but most likely it will just eat a removal. And that's the problem with that kind of a card. If we go to the next one, it's Etali, Primal Storm. And I know what you're thinking, that the common thing is that bad cards are legendary dinosaurs, but I promise you this is the last one on the list. Etali, Primal Storm, 6 mana for a legendary creature dinosaur, 6/6. Whenever it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. And this is sort of similar. It looks a bit better because it's cheaper, but the body is just a 6/6 without any trample, without any evasion. And then you are on the mercy of the top of the library. You don't know what the opponent has, but probably those are the cards that are not really working well with your deck because their deck is different. Your own cards, well, what you have is what you might get. You may get a land, which you can't even play because you can only cast spells. So any lands are just dead from Etali. And 6/6 is very easy to double block. So maybe you get a 1 trigger out of it, and that's about it. Next card we have Jace Reawakened. Blue for a legendary planeswalker, Jace. You can't cast this spell during your first, second, or third turn of the game. And then plus to loot, plus to exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand, and you can plot it. Or -6, the ultimate, until end of turn. Whenever you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. And has 3 loyalty altogether. And the problem with that one is that, well, it doesn't protect itself. It doesn't even draw cards, it just loots. It's cheap, but you cannot cast it super early. It is clearly another card that was built for Constructed, very much like Galta. And I'm not even saying that it's a good card for Constructed, although Jace has been beloved by some people I respect. Like Jason particularly loves Jace Reawakened in many decks. But it's not a card that is perfectly suited for Limited, and that is reflected with the win rate. And I'm sure there can be some good Jace decks, but unfortunately, those are hard to play, which means that the win rate is going to suffer because people who shouldn't be playing Jace are probably the ones that are most likely to try to play it, and that creates this maelstrom of low win rate through that. Next card we have Tarion Soul Cleaver, and this is an artifact, legendary artifact, equipment, 1 mana. It gives equipped creature vigilance, and whenever another artifact or creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature, and equip cost is 2. And Tarion Soul Cleaver probably, in my opinion, is the sort of a victim of the fact that it's both a rare and at the same time it's a colorless rare. And there people think, well, it's a colorless equipment, I can put it into any of my decks. But in fact, it had a very narrow home in that set. Maybe a black-white deck in Lost Caverns of Ixalan was not doing that much. Maybe if it was whenever another artifact or creature is put into graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter. Oh, put a whatever counter on Tarion Soul Cleaver, and then when you equip, the target creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of counters on this equipment. It would have been great, but yeah, as I see in the chat, someone says, I played it, I wished it was a 2/2 creature instead of what it was most of the time. I assume that's going to be the end of that sentence. And I do agree. Probably you're much more better off playing a vanilla 2/2 creature in your deck rather than this situational thing. And the problem with that card is that sometimes it will do something spectacular and win the game. And we will remember that, but we won't remember that in 8 of the 10 games, it actually did stone cold nothing. Next card, Sothera the Super Void. I've been chastised by not picking that card in the early draft in Edge of Eternities. And actually, the win rate of it is pretty bad. And sometimes it does something, but a lot of times it just does stone cold nothing. And this is also not accounting for the situations where opponent just can't cast it because one of the players doesn't have creatures on board. It's like such an horrendous top deck when you're behind and you draw it, and there's nothing you can do. You can cast it, and it will sacrifice itself instantly. But if you'd rather so much more wanted to have any kind of creature at the same spot. So there, of course, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent chooses a creature they control and exiles it. At the beginning of your end step, if a player controls no creatures, sacrifice Sothera, then put a creature card exiled with it onto the battlefield under your control with 2 additional +1/+1 counters. And I played against it just a couple of days ago, and my opponent managed to sacrifice a creature. I had a token, so I sacrificed the token, and then I just started attacking with my creatures, and eventually my opponent had to block them, and they died. And they were not exiled, and then Sothera died, and we traded the board. Nothing happened, and they didn't get the bonus out of it. And that was the whole thing with this card. And I think that it's a very common scenario. And of course, sometimes it will win you the games. But sometimes winning the games, and lots of the times doing nothing, and sometimes being actively a horrendous top deck, that's not a recipe for a great card. Same gist, we have Dawnsire, Sunstar Dreadnought, 5 mana, spacecraft. If you crew it for 10, whenever you attack, it deals 100 damage to one target creature or planeswalker. And if you put 20 counters on it, it becomes a 20/20 flyer. And this, again, promises a lot, but the reality of it is that it's very hard to fully crew it and survive. And even if you do it, you maybe kill one creature, but it's not always great, especially against the white board. And to make sure that it's actually the 20/20 flyer, it's not very easy. And meanwhile, it can eat good amount of removal at the same time. Treasure Map is another card on the list, also of 1.9 and very low win rate. I think that this card was a trap of both being colorless and having constructed credentials. People saw it. Oh, Treasure Map, that was played in Standard. Must be good in Draft, therefore. Wrong. It was not great in that particular format. Yeah, Treasure Map, 2 mana, tap to scry 1, you put a counter on it. Then if there are 3 or more counters on it, transform it and create 3 treasure tokens, and you got and you got yourself a land that lets you sacrificing treasures to draw cards. Very slow. It was just not what the format wanted to be doing when, blue red and white blue decks were pretty aggressive and winning very fast. Lord Skitter's Blessing, 1 in a black for an enchantment. When it enters, create a Wicked Roll token attached to target creature you control. And at the beginning of your draw step, if you control an enchanted creature, you will lose 1 life and draw an additional card. Wilds of Eldraine was a fast format, and Lord Skitter's Blessing was just not made for it. I think that this card could have been actually quite decent, maybe in things like Foundation, if Foundation had rolls. But a lot of the time, it was a do-nothing thing. You played for 2 mana, you put a Wicked Roll on something, this thing dies, all of a sudden you just have a 2 mana enchantment that doesn't do anything until you play the next roll. And if it was important for the opponent not to let you draw in cards, they could have prevented it most of the time. And if they didn't care about you drawing cards, they just let you lose the life, no problem. So you were too much at the mercy of your opponents at the same time in a format where decks could have been very, very assertive and very fast. Brazen Steppe Siege from Tarkir Dragonstorm is number 4 on our list. And this one was a surprise for me. I was expecting this card is going to be decent early in the format. 2 white-black for an enchantment. You choose Abzan or Mardu. If you choose Abzan, then at the beginning of each of your end steps, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. And if you choose Mardu, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. Sort of Sothera, but I do assume that the Abzan mode was played probably like 95% of the time. The problem was that Abzan deck was just not very good. And white-black was also not a very good deck. If you played white, aggressive, you played white-red. If you wanted to play white, grindy, you played Jeskai. And Brazen Steppe probably would have been a slightly better card. Not an amazing card, but definitely a better card if Abzan was a stronger color combination. And I think that this particular card is a victim of how the format turned out. Then we have Delny, Streetwise Lookout. 3 mana for a 2/2 human scout. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Here, the issue was that this thing ate removal very easily, and the body is very small, and it's underrated. And the payoffs were not that amazing in the set. Maybe you got like an extra 2/2 or something, or extra loot or something. But it definitely gains in a dedicated EDH deck. That's why this card is the most expensive card from MKM. But it did not play. Number 2 on our list, Sword of Wealth and Power. It's from the Big Score from OTJ. And it's the very unnecessary addition to the sword cycle because we've got the completed version of each of the 2 color pairs. And then they decided, why don't we make more swords? And this one gives creature +2/+2 and protection from instant and sorceries. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose a new targets for the copy. And I think that because it doesn't give protection from colors, it just doesn't give the evasion that was making all the other swords great. And then making a treasure and getting a bonus for actually having to cast something is not exactly the same as drawing a card or doing damage or returning a creature from your graveyard to your hand or something. It's a very situational bonus with Sword of Wealth and Power, and this combined with the lack of evasion showed that it was not that great. And of course, because the card is colorless, it was a super high pick because any deck can play it. And top of the list, Tezzeret, Cruel Captain. From the current set, 3 mana Planeswalker, colorless Planeswalker, doesn't have a plus ability, but whenever an artifact you control enters, you put a counter on it, loyalty counter. And then it can, for a 0, it can untap an artifact or a creature. And if it's an artifact creature, you also put a counter on it. -3, you can search for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less. And The ultimate is -7. You get an emblem. At the beginning of your combat or your turn, you can put 3+1/+1 counters on target artifact. If it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 creature. And yeah, Tezzeret can be a good card, but there is a minute fractions of decks in Edge of Eternities that are good Tezzeret decks. And people have to first pick it because it's a colorless power planeswalker. And then they probably fall into a trap of trying to build too much around it. And because of that, win rate suffers. And also because it's a chase card, alpha is very low. And in paper you might go for it because at least you get 20 pounds of Tezzeret as a reward for that. But on Arena you can easily craft any number of mythics if you're playing draft. So there is no really need for picking it. You might as well pass it and let someone else try to build around Tezzeret. It is a fun build around when it comes together, but it's more like a reward of being in the right lane than a reason to be in that lane. So when we look at those traps, well, first of all, there are 2 Grave Pact effects and 2 dinosaurs, but I don't think that these are the real trends. I think that the biggest trend was colorless cards, because when we look at it, we got Tarion Soul Cleaver, we got Dawn-Sire, we got Treasure Map, we got Sword of Wealth and Power, and we got Tezzeret, Cruel Captain. Colorless cards are going to be very high picks because they technically go into every deck. But you have to remember that the fact that something goes into every deck doesn't mean that it should go into every deck. And I think that this is the trap that people fall into. But another trend that I noticed are cards that have a low floor and a potentially high ceiling, but a lot of things have to go right to reach that ceiling. And we are trapped into thinking about that ceiling, while in fact, most of the time we're going to experience the floor. And I'm thinking cards like Delny, Streetwise Lookout. Yeah, the ceiling is, I play my 2/2 that brings another 2/2 with it, and I get another 2/2, and then my 4 mana bring 2 2/2s becomes almost an Imperial Oath. But most of the time, it's 3 mana 2/2 that you're casting, and that's basically it. Baron Step Siege looks like, my team is going so much bigger. But a lot of the time, it's just, I played it, they killed my creatures, now I have an enchantment that doesn't do much. Dawn-Sire, once I crew it, it will kill things every turn into Abyss. Reality, in order to properly station it, you probably need to sacrifice so much life that you might be dead before it happens. Tarion Soul Cleaver, my creature can be like a 6/6. My 1-drop can be a 6/6 if I equip it. But most of the times, the one drop will grow to a 3/3, then get killed, and then you have to restart it at the cost of mana for equipping. And a lot of those things, like Atali, the same. When I attack with it, I'm going to be generating so much card value. But the reality is you attack once with it, it gets double blocked by a 3/3 and by a 4/4, and you reveal 2 lands of the top, and you get 0 card advantage out of it. Notably, I did cast Atali Primal Storm in my Foundation's pre-release on turn 3, nonetheless, and that won me the game. Turn 3, Atali, good. Turn 6, Atali, not so good. So yeah, I think that this is the main aspect of the traps. And also in here, I do have to say that those cards are picked so highly because of the rarity. The rarity trap is real. People evaluate rares through rose-tinted glasses, and that's maybe something that we should keep in mind. And that's why I think a very interesting category of the traps are the uncommon traps. Because here, we don't have the incentive of rarity. Uncommon, come on, we can all craft an uncommon card. There's no reason for picking it early. So why would you pick some random uncommon highly? Because there is something appealing about it. And if they have a low win rate, they will be still traps. So why do we pick those uncommons, and what uncommons were particularly trappy? And number 1, Grahatia. 5 mana, 3/5 reach. Whenever one of your more creatures you control die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. 5 mana for a 3/5 reach is a loss of mana. It's definitely underrated for what it does. So the biggest benefit is the ability when something dies, you draw a card. But it turns out it didn't work. Also a 4, so picked relatively high. But a low win rate below, D+ or lower. Another card that we have there, Back for Seconds, which is a card I have to say I had to read. So I will read it also to you because I assume a lot of you don't remember that gem from Wilds of Eldraine. 3 mana sorcery, bargain. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. If this spell was bargained, you may put one of those cards with mana value 4 or less onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your hand. And Back for Seconds, this kind of an effect is good in some sets. I just assumed that it was just specifically bad in Wilds of Eldraine because that was not what the format was about. And I think that this is trap here. A card that is good sometimes, but not in every set, will have a set where it's just not very good. Even though that technically looks like a very good version of that effect, because maybe you even get 4 mana of value back. And it maybe has something to do with how easy it was to fill your graveyard with creatures in Throne of Eldraine, Wilds of Eldraines, as opposed to some other sets. By the way, in the previous category, someone guessed a tally, which was a great guess, but no more guesses in the chat. Chat is afraid of putting their stuff on the line. Next one, we have Atmospheric Greenhouse from Edge of Eternities. 5 mana spacecraft. When it enters, you put +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, and it turns into a 5/4 flying trampler. This looks like a white-green card, just doesn't perform. With one major exception, if it's cast against me, it will almost assuredly win the game. So, yeah, there's that. I lose to that card every single time my opponent plays it. And maybe I'm just unlucky, but most of the time when something happens more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times to me, I just think maybe my decks are built in such a way that they're not particularly good in dealing with white boards. And that's why Atmospheric Greenhouse is going to slaughter me. My decks are built in a way that develops slowly and don't contribute too much to the board early, and then take over the game once I stabilize. But if you go particularly wide and can support it with the Atmospheric Greenhouse in the right moment, I will fold like House of Cards. And I think that this is my problem of my deck building. However, those decks do win with everything else, and that's the advantage of it. I mean, I'm sitting quite comfortably at 65% win rate in Edge of Eternity, so I'm not going to cry about it. It's just that my decks are specifically not well built to play against Atmospheric Greenhouse. But in general, the card is a trap because the decks that I'm winning with are dealing with Atmospheric Greenhouse very well. And that's, I think, specificity of Edge of Eternities. Fear of Exposure. Now, this card is a 3 mana 5/4 with trample. But as an additional cost to cast this spell, you must tap 2 untapped creatures and or lands you control. So technically a 5 mana 5/4 trample, maybe less. And this was supposed to be, enabling survival. You can tap some of your creatures with Survivor and then cast it cheaper, and it's big. But in reality, it was not a great card. It was often just a big dumb beast in the world where all the creatures were generating tons of value. And it offers some upside, but this upside is not like that you're going to be casting it reliably on turn 3, because you rarely will have a curve out 1-drop, 2-drop Fear of Exposure. And even if you do, you stopped your aggression for a moment, which means that you're going to be a bit of more of a back foot. If they deal with the Fear of Exposure, which is also an enchantment creature, which made it easier to deal with, then you're way behind because you not only lost momentum, but also didn't gain much from it because removal just completely annihilates that kind of play. So that was the problem with the Fear of Exposure. And then we have a collection of cards that are very similar. Endrider Spike Spitter, 4 mana 3/4, reach, start your engines. At max speed at the beginning of your upkeep, exile a top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So if it was a card that does what it does without the max speed, 4 mana 3/4 that just draws you an extra card at the beginning of your upkeep, probably it was acceptable. It still doesn't do anything when it enters, really. But at least if you untap with it, it would start generating the value. This one doesn't even guarantee that you're going to be generating value when you untap with it. And that's why probably the win rate was low. But it does offer amazing dream of drawing 2 cards a turn. And which Magic player can say no to a dream of drawing 2 cards a turn? Stinging Cave Crawler. 3 mana, Death Touch 1/3, sorry. When Descent 4, whenever Stinging Cave Crawler attacks, if there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you draw a card and lose a life. Guess what? A creature that offers a dream of drawing 2 cards, but you need to work hard on it. And when you reach that majestic dream, opponent can just block it. Fine, I'll just block it and I'll kill it dead and it doesn't draw any more cards. Voidforge Titan. 5 mana, 5/4, Void. At the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. Do you see a certain trend here in the biggest traps? They all offer the draw 2 cards a turn dream, but very situational. What do we have here? Oh, Broodguard Elite is the next one. That's an X green for an XX. So the creature enters with the X +1/+1 counters on it. When this leaves battlefield, put its counters on target creature you control. And it also has a warp for green and an X. So idea is that, okay, I'll on whatever turn that I don't have anything to do, I'm going to warp it for green and 5. It comes as a 5/5. Maybe I station something, then it disappears, and the 5 +1/+1 counters are moved on something else. And then I recast it, and it's again a 5/5, and I do something else. And yeah, the chat very well observed. Yeah, it's good with their symbiosis, but the problem is it's not amazing in any other green build. It's fine sometimes. Sometimes it will even win games, but so many times it would just be a waste of space. You cast it on for a warp cost, put the counters on something that gets killed in response, and you ended up spending tons of mana for nothing, really. And that's, I think, the problem with the card. It doesn't give you the instant advantage. It is very easily completely zeroed. Similar card here, Unwilling Vessel. This one also offered a dream. 3 mana, 3/2 vigilance with Eerie. Whenever enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully open a room, put a possession counter on Unwilling Vessel. And when Unwilling Vessel dies, create an XX Blue Spirit creature token with flying, where X is the number of counters on Unwilling Vessel. The problem is that if you cast it on curve, you can't attack with it because it will die and you will not get your XX. And if you don't attack with it, then the XX is not that useful because you didn't attack with the creature that you play very early. So you have to stop your aggression, very much like in case of the Fear of Exposure. You need to stop your aggression in order to play this thing and maybe accrue some value later. But then you can be easily bamboozled out of that value by someone killing the vessel before you get a counter on it or whatever. And you end up stone cold nothing. And that's the problem of Unwilling Vessel. Floor is very low. Ceiling is potentially high, but very rarely. 5 mana, 4/4. Whenever an artifact you control enters, create a 2/2 colorless robot creature artifact token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Yeah, but first you need to cast a 5-drop. Good chance that if you cast a 5-drop, you won't have enough mana to cast another thing. And if you can't cast another thing, you need to wait a turn, which gives your opponent the whole turn cycle to decide, do I care about your 2/2 or do I kill the Mechan Assembler? And often they will just go, yeah, I'll just kill it, fine. You're not getting any value. And, in those rare occasions when you untap with it and you make a couple of robots, yeah, sure, it's great. It's just not going to happen very often. Okay, number 2 on that list of biggest traps, Harried Dronesmith. And this doesn't give you extra cards each turn, but it gives you a 1/1 flyer each turn that can attack. So technically, it's a 4 mana for a 2/3, and every turn you make a hasty 1/1 flyer. But it's not the same as making permanent creature over 2 bodies. This thing has to live. Once it dies, you get rid of the 1/1 as well. And this is not the same as, let's say you make a 3/3 and a 1/1. You kill the 3/3, 1/1 stays. This one, no. This one dies, the 1/1 disappears. And that's a big difference in those kind of cards. And that's why it was picked as if, oh, this is a body that brings another body with them. But in reality, it was not. And the last card on the list, technically an uncommon according to 17 Men's data. It was on the list in Murders of Karlov Manor. Mentor of the Meek. And this is a classic, in my opinion, boomer limited card that just doesn't exist today. And who knows how good it was in the olden days before the data. But this card underperforms time after time. It's just most of the time it's a rare and not an uncommon. But in this one particular set, it was technically an uncommon. Mentor of the Meek, 3 mana 2/2. So same story as Delny from the rares list. It's just a very bad body. And then, when another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 if you do draw a card, which means that you then have to cast your small creatures for extra mana, again under raid. So you put a 3 mana 2/2, and then your next 2 mana 2/2, if you want to draw a card, will also cost 3 mana, which will stop you from usefully double spelling for the dubious benefit of drawing extra card. The problem with this in the sort of aggressive deck is that those decks are built for short games. And to have short games, you need to snowball advantage. You need to start pushing damage. You're not going to push a damage with the 3 mana 2/2 that is followed up by another 3 mana 2/2 and drawing a card. Drawing a card is not something that you're interested in. And maybe there are some decks that can benefit from Mentor of the Meek. Not in those formats. In those formats, white decks were more assertive, more aggressive. So this is what you wanted to be doing. And again, if we look at those traps at uncommon, almost all of them are conditional. If A happens, maybe this card will be actually good on raid. But the problem is that often A will not happen. And then you end up with a creature that is bad on raid. Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe it doesn't do much on entry and one removal away and you gain nothing. And you made your opponent 3 mana removal into a useful card because it killed 5 mana of your sunk costs, basically. Cards that cost above 4 mana value have to deliver something on spot most of the time or have ward or something. Otherwise, they're not going to be good. And examples of that will be Mouth of the Storm, which has both. It delivers something on spot because it annihilates the next turn of the opponent. Even if they kill it, you'll stop them from attacking, basically. And at the same time, they have a ward 3 or whatever. 2. Which means that instead of spending like 4 mana on killing it, now they have to spend 6 mana, which makes it at least sort of an even deal. If it didn't have a ward and you could kill it for 3 mana, 4, still wouldn't have been a great deal even by buying the turn. And that's already with the ETB effect. All right. And the last part of the traps are commons. And it takes a lot for a common to bamboozle players because we see commons so much. We have them in our decks every draft. We see multiple copies of those cards every single draft that we play. So it needs to specifically tap into our monkey brain and use our natural tendencies at its best. So this is how the common traps look like. And try to guess some, chat. Try to guess which are the biggest trap commons. And the first one was Public Thoroughfare, a land from MKM. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters, sacrifice it unless you tap an untapped artifact or land you control, and then can tap for mana of any color. So basically the same thing as we have in the Edge of Eternities. It has an ALSA of 5.5, but wasn't Meteor Golem an uncommon? Yeah, it's just a bad land, but people try to splash with it, and that never worked very well. It also probably has a lower win rate because it's naturally used in decks that try to splash, and splashing always comes at a cost. Cosmium Blast. 1 and a white for an instant. Cosmium Blast deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is a weapon from older days, really. 2 mana, deal 4 to attacker or blocker. This is something that doesn't really fly well most of the sets right now. I think that this kind of an effect has to cost 1 mana to be playable. And, in maybe like Guilds of Ravnica or something, that would have been a card that was okay on raid, but not in today's economy. For 2 mana, it really needs to do a lot more. It has to have some kind of modality maybe, but not just that effect. Just that effect, you want probably like more something that will reliably deal 5 to 6 damage for 1 mana, because It does require your opponent to be attacking. It does require you to be not particularly aggressive or attacking your opponent at a different level than they are attacking you. So if you have flyers, they have ground creatures, maybe that's fine. But in LCI, it was just not a card that was particularly good. But people pick it highly because there is a removal bias. Removal is going to be picked higher than regular cards, even adjusting by the power level. Okay, next, Heaped Harvest. And that's my personal pain because I played tons of that card, mainly in my Builder's Talent build rounds. But I think people just played it as a regularly good card, and that was the problem with why its win rate was tanking. People tried to use it to splash. People tried to use it to play grinding games, while Bloomborough was not particularly well equipped to play that kind of game. It's a 3-mana food artifact. When it enters and when you sacrifice it, you may search for your library for a basic and put it into battlefield tapped. And you can, of course, sacrifice it to gain 3 life, as with every food. So it was sort of like split in 2 pieces. Fetch 2 basic lands from your deck, gain some life. I had good success with that card. I played a lot of Builder's Talent decks in Bloomborough, but again, I've seen it so often just played in bad version of the Squirrel black-green decks, and they were not doing much in there, not really playing well with the plan of the Squirrels, which was more aggressive and not rampy. Also, this particular set did not have much on the top end in terms of creatures, so ramping to what? The only deck that I wanted to ramp was Otters, and it ramped by drawing more cards. I totally agree, Bailey. I don't know if you could hear my dog, I don't know, complaining, I guess. Then we have Feral Deathgorger, one of the dragons from Tarkir Dragonstorm. It's just 6-mana flyers. They required a lot of concessions to put them at common. And, the body is not particularly attractive. 6 mana is a lot. You should have been playing better dragons, but some people tried to force the dragon archetype with the globes, and because of that, ended up playing menial dragons and having compete for them. And I think that was part of the late format trap in this format, that people tried to force the dragons deck, and it was just never open. Acrobatic Cheerleader. 2 mana 2/2 flyer. That should be good. Oh, wait, it's not a 2 mana 2/2 flyer. It is a flyer if it survives the first attack. And who normal in this format, in this time and day and age, does not have a blocker on turn 2? So you had a choice. I played on turn 2. Turn 3, I play a removal, attack with it. Now I have a 2/2 flyer. But also, I stopped putting power on board. And because of that, I'm not having the momentum right now. I'm going to have that 2/2 flyer that will do some chip damage and then quickly get blanked by whatever my opponent is doing. Or I'm hoping that my opponent doesn't have a 2-drop. Not going to happen. Or they just block it and it does nothing. It's just a 2/2 vanilla that was chomped by another 2/2. And that's the problem with that card. It offers a dream of, it will be a 2/2 flyer. But the situation when it's a 2/2 flyer is not going to be common. I think that the best scenario with it was to play it on turn 2, and then on turn 3, you send it to the sky. There was the 1 mana +2/+2 and flying trick. Attack with it for 4. It becomes a flyer, and you play another 2-drop. That was probably the best kind of scenario that you get. Thunder Salvo, another removal that was not that great. Also, red was not that great in the format in general. And because of that, it had low win rate. And because it was a removal, it had a high premium of removal, and people picked it highly. Pangolin, Overplayed Pangolin. Now, that card is picked very high, and it has the same issue as Mentor of the Meek. It will be good in some decks, and I had a deck that was solid and had Overplayed Pangolins, and they were doing very good. But most of the decks, what it will naturally do is make you play out of the mana curve. So you play it on turn 2, which is fine. But then on turn 3, you play a 2-drop and pay 1 mana to make this one bigger. Then on turn 4, you play 3-drop and 1 mana to make this thing bigger. Then they kill it, and now you're left with playing creatures off curve while your opponent maybe was playing on curve, and now they have a super advantage, and now their things are bigger, and you can't do much about it. And that's, I think, that unhealthy kind of play pattern that those cards generate that makes them weaker. Free Strider Commando, 3 mana, 3/3 vanilla. But if you plot it, you pay 4 mana and not cast it, but cast it next turn. Well, then you might get a 4 mana 5/5 at some stage that is cast outside of the curve. And sometimes that card was nice when you had some reanimation strategies, maybe. And from the graveyard, it came back as a 5/5 as well because you didn't pay mana for it. But most of the time, the card was just very bad, but people loved it. Because at worst, it's a center courser. Well, the problem is that center courser is not a good card anymore. Good card is Galactic Wayfarer, which is the certain courser that gives you extra good value on top of it. Center courser is whatever the thing was from Pyrexia Obi-Wan that found you a land or whatever. Those were good cards, but not Free Strider Commando. That's just too bad a value. And in the end, it comes as a 5/5, but again, it's a kind of a 5/5 that, yeah, you spend a removal spell and it's just dead and achieved nothing. Drig's Fatemaker is also on this list. And I was just thinking, like, I need to make a data comparison of Drig's Fatemaker and the Night Luminary, because technically they are the same card. But you see what a big difference it is to make a 1/1 versus to put a +1/+1 counter on a target. It's night and day as a difference. Because Night Luminary is an amazing card. Drig's Fatemaker is just drags. You sometimes will like to have it in your deck. But there's such a big difference in play pattern. Luminary, happy to play on turn 2. I get my 1/1, fine. On turn 4, I get a 1/1 and a 3/2. I'm having a white board. Drig's Fatemaker, what am I going to do with it on turn 2? What? Maybe I had a 1-drop? Maybe. Then I can play it on turn 2, and that's fine. But most of the time, I won't have a 1-drop because there are not that many 1-drops in this format. I'm just it's just gonna sit in my hand. So Night Luminary extends the amount of 2-drops I have in the deck. Drig's Fatemaker doesn't most of the time. And, there will be good games in that sometimes. Okay, this one is a weird one because Thoughtcast was in the special guest, but technically it's a common according to the 17 lands data. And I think that the trap here is that people picked it highly because it was so rare to see one and that they wanted to try it. 5 mana affinity for artifacts, draw 2 cards. So in the best world, you can play 1 mana to draw 2 cards. Most of the time, you probably get 4 mana to draw 2 cards, which is bad at sorcery speed. And that's what was the problem with it. Then we have Fate of the Suncrest. And this is, in my opinion, a good example of recency bias. We just moved from Ether Drift, where Ride's End was a great card. And then people say, well, Fate of the Suncrest is sort of like Ride Down. Not even close, not even remotely close in power level. Similar, but not the same. There is some kind of a meme. No, we are not the same with the guy from Pollo Hernano or whatever. It's just more expensive, more clunky, did not have synergies, just wrong card, basically. And yet picked as if it was the thing from before. And the last card, at ALSA 4.1, Riling Dawnbreaker. And this card, I think, also suffers from comparison to similar analogous cards from the past. Riling Dawnbreaker is sort of like Combat Professor if you squint, but it's 1 more mana, and it can't pump itself, and it doesn't give like additional bonuses. It's just a 3/4 that gives +1/+0 to something until end of turn. And it was a dragon, which means was picked much heavier by the players just because they wanted to draft their dragon deck. And yes, the Omen part is nice. It makes a 2/2 vanilla, but there's nothing to like shout about. I mean, yay, I got a 2/2 vanilla, and then I can draw this dragon later in the game. Nothing that I will be super excited with. It was just not doing what the set was trying to do, which was be super aggressive with the Boros decks, or be like super mid-range, late game, big game, and try to stabilize through the aggression of the early turns. And this did nothing. It was like neither good in aggression nor great in being a late value engine. So yeah, it did exactly. You fell exactly into the mid-range trap of the format. It was neither that was not mid-range, but either aggro or late game. All right, that covers the traps. Problem here, creatures that are clunky, designs that are similar to things that we've seen in the past but weaker, and things that require you jumping through the hoops to get rate, and things that are pricier than you would expect for similar effect. Like Cosmium Blast, a great example of something that is just too expensive. Free Strider Commando, again, too clunky, not enough value. Fate of the Suncrest, too expensive compared to what Ride's End was providing. Yeah, so these were the common traps. Let's go to the next category, which are hidden gems. And hidden gems are cards that have high alpha, which means they go late in the draft, but also have high win rate. So why some cards are escaping our careful eye and get undervalued by the general population. So why people undervalue those cards, and sometimes there are good reasons for that, but sometimes there are no good reasons for that, and that's just our monkey brain again. Okay, first card on the list with alpha 5 and grade of at least B-. And that was the criterion of that. They had to have at least B- grade in my tier list. It's Twisted Fealty. That's one of the gain control of target creature until end of turn. Make a wicked roll attached to it. The issue with the card is that it goes late most of the time because it only has one home, and that's black-red. And that was the case in that particular set. So there is a very valid explanation why it goes later. It's a secret gold card, and gold cards tend to go late. Glimmer Burst, 5.4 alpha, very high win rate. Draw 2 cards, create a 1/1 Glimmer enchantment creature token. There was no good reason for that card to be picked so late. You can figure it out, and we discussed the Night Luminary earlier today. Making that 1/1 and also making an enchantment at instant speed is a good thing when you have Eerie in the set, because it gives you some additional triggers potentially. Drawing 2 cards for 4 mana, not good, but add a 1/1 body to it, all of a sudden it becomes a great card. And I can imagine it was maybe slightly undervalued, but it was quite clear from the previous season that this card is going to be good. People were not keen on drafting it. Part of it is because a lot of the early career drafters are undervaluing blue in general, and that might be the general trend there, but no good reason for undervaluing this card. Refute. Another example of adding small thing to something that is generally clunky, in this case cancel, makes a big difference. Cancel, meh. Cancel that loots, great all of a sudden. It gives me card selection. It was also working well with what the set was having to offer. It gave you some potential synergy connections. And the card turned out to be a B- level common. And just adding a small thing to a design that is not that appealing. And very much, this is the reverse of what we saw in the traps, where traps were, oh, this was a version of a good card, but maybe 1 mana more expensive. All of a sudden, it's trash. This one, trash card, add a little bit, great. Ariad's Tempting Apple. This was a double trap because, first of all, it was a very weird card. Second of all, it was not what we are used to. Normally, the steal and sacrifice kind of card is in red, and this one was colorless, and then it was weird because it was food. But reality is that it's just a threaten effect with an amazing option of either sacrificing it to gain or drain. Very much like Dubious Delicacy, and it often acted like Dubious Delicacy, only colorless, especially if you had some kind of a sacrifice fodder. So this card was probably partially picked lower because of its weirdness. Even though it was a colorless card, and as I said, colorless cards are picked slightly higher, this one was so weird that people just ignored it. And arguably, there's limited housing that this card would be great in, which maybe helped it, but still I think it was generally underdrafted. Take Up the Shield. 1 and a white, instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, it gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. From OTJ. It's a combat trick, and there's only that many combat tricks you can put in your deck. And I think that was part of the issue why this card was picked so late. Still, card was great. it's basically a removal spell for 2 mana. So many times, because once you're attacking, once you're aggressive, very often opponent was tapped out, you attack, they have to decide, do I let those attacks in? Do I block and pray for not having to take up the shield? They always had to take up the shield. It just always happened. You should know by now. But people still tried and then paid the price for it. And the lifelink on top of it is just such a nice swing of life. Zidane Tantalus Thief. Now this is a multicolor card, and I think that that's the part why it was picked so late. Also in the color combination that was maybe not the most exciting, although it was quite strong. But I think that Zidane particularly, it's another threaten effect, by the way. That's a third threaten effect on the list, and that maybe shows you that maybe it's worth building around your decks or drafting your decks in such a way that the threaten effect is good. My personal story with Zidane Tantalus Thief is that I played a game against someone who played Jumbo Cactuar, and I managed to gain 20,000 life through that because I stole it twice with Zidane, and and I survived much longer in that game, gave myself a chance to find a removal for Jumbo Cactuar. If I drew a removal, I was winning that game on the spot. Alas, I did not draw a removal, and they managed to kill me in the end. But hey, it was fun to have 20,000 life for a moment. But yeah, card was great, and another threatened effect that is a hidden gem. Cash grab. Again, no good explanation for that card to be undervalued. We've been after MH3. People saw what Malevolent Rumble can do. Cash grab, not as good as Malevolent Rumble, but still good enough. Still generated some value. Still gave you card draw with amazing selection and fueled graveyard synergies in a deck where foraging was a thing. That card was great, and people should have played it higher, put it more into their decks. I was not complaining. I was drafting them left and right. But the general population definitely undervalued hidden cash grab without a good reason for it. Ruthless Negotiation was a trickier card because that's something that looks like it's pretty rubbish, to be fair. 1 mana to discard a card. Oh, exile, really. And then Flashback for 5 that does the same, but also draws you a card. Now, very often this card was scary to play it against because, you discarded 1 card, and that's nothing. But the fact that at a certain stage they will just be able to pluck that last card from your hand and also draw a card required you to play around it well. And some people did not, and that's why the card had a very high win rate at the B level, really. Because it was also like almost a natural 2-for-1. They exile 2 cards from their hand, you draw a card. Is it a 3-for-1? Yeah, something like that. So yeah, great card. And 5.5 also, which means it went pretty late. It was wheeling reliably for a good card like that. Obviously, you don't want to have more than 1 copy of that in your deck most of the time. Flick a coin. 3 mana, instant, deals 1 damage to any target. You create a treasure and draw a card. So technically 2 mana because it generated that coin. That coin that could be later used to maybe cast some spells that you wouldn't be able to cast because maybe you played a 3-color deck. You draw a card, so it's card neutral, and there was so many targets that it could kill in that particular format. So it was a great removal spell. A great removal spell, well aligned with the creature sizing of the format. That also draws a card, but it just doesn't look very appealing, I think, to the beginner players, and that's why it was going super late. Cogwork Wrestler, another card that is maybe undervalued by the beginner players. 1 mana, 1/2, flash. When it enters, target creature and opponent controls get -2, -0 until end of turn. Whenever I attacked and opponent had 1 blue open, I'm just like, please don't have the Cogwork Wrestler. Again, they always had it. It always happened. And this thing changed combat so dramatically when it entered. It was perfectly aligned with the artifact synergies and small creature combat in that particular format in LCI. And the card was just great, but it was just not valued very highly. And that was the secret why those white-blue and red-blue decks were so strong, even late to the format. It's so hard to play around a 1-mana combat trick. And if that 1-mana combat trick leaves a body behind, well, it all of a sudden becomes a very good 1-mana combat trick. Scale of Shale, talking about combat tricks that are costing 1 mana very often and are so hard to play against it. It was impossible to play against Scales of Shale. You knew that they had it. What can you do about it? 3 mana, costs 1 less for each lizard you control, so often it costs 1. Target creature gets +2/+0, gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. And you had to pick your spot when to cast it, but every time you cast it, it just did something horrendous. And nothing that the opponent can do about it. And also of 6.1 was wheeling. And this particular one, I said that combat tricks, how many you can play in your deck. I played decks that had 2-3 Scales of Shale and was fine if I had enough lizards. Because that card was just so backbreaking and could win games that no other card could win. Lost a box thanks to it. Thanks Scales of Shale. And then last card, Humiliate. Also of 6.9, so almost assuredly wheeling. That card was not great in its original format, but it was great in OTJ because there were cheaper creatures, because crimes was a thing. Target opponent reveals their card, you choose a non-land card from it, that player discards that card, put a +1/+1 counter on creature you control. So like a coercion, but for 2 mana, white and black, and you get a counter on the creature you control if you have a creature you control. And that card played great in those kind of grindy white-black decks in this format, but people had memory of this not being great in its original format and not as good as it was hyped to be. And because of that, it went, I think, way too late in OTJ. Okay, so the hidden gems, common things, hard to splash multicolor in weaker pairs, combat tricks, new takes on old cards that maybe looks a bit surprising, and cards with narrow homes, like all the threatened effects that we saw before. Refute is a good example of new takes on oldies that have a slight value added to it. Same with Glimmer Burst. Same with Flick a Coin, maybe. Cogwork Wrestler. All kinds of cards like that are slightly different takes on older cards and that people did not reevaluate with fresh take, maybe with more context of the format, particular sets that they were released in. Okay, we go to the top things, and we start with the best commons. And I picked Withering Chrysalis as my cover sheet for that thing because overpowered common can ruin a format, and that was an example of the most extreme card that was printed in the last years. Common so powerful that it basically warped the whole format around it. But a great common can make a format more fun. If it's not super overpowered, if it doesn't take over the whole meta game, great common can make it more fun, especially when it's added to a color that is a bit struggling. So what are the common traits of great commons? Let's start looking at the win rates now, not ALSA. And we start with Makeshift Binding, the 12th most powerful common of the last year and a half or so. Makeshift Binding, 3 mana Oblivion Ring effect that gains you 2 life, and the normalized win rate of 52.5. Solid removal, great card. You want to play it in your white decks. It doesn't warp the format around it, but it just is good and answers exactly what you want. By the way, there's not perfectly an Oblivion Ring because it only targets creatures, but it can exile a creature, you gain 2 life. This 2 life is so crucial in this particular card. Then we have Stampeding Scaryfoot. 1 mana, 1/1. You can exhaust it, you put a counter on it, and you make a 3/3 elephant creature token. Superb card. I loved playing it in Ether Drift. When opponent played it on turn 1, you're just like, oh, God, do I have to waste removal on this thing? Otherwise, it just becomes a 3/3 and a 2/2 for 5 mana that's split over 2 turns, which is a really good deal. And yeah, it turns out that you probably should be casting removal on it before it can be triggered for the first time. White Auracite, another Oblivion Ring. When it enters, exile target non-permanent until this leaves the battlefield, and it taps for white, so it sort of like recoups itself and then can help you ramp to something bigger. Super fun card to play. Like catch-all removal that also ramps you to something bigger. It gives artifact synergies like I really like that card, and I like playing with it. Waterwind Scout. 3 mana 2/2 flyer. Not good enough in the current economy. Hey, but when it enters, it makes a map token. All of a sudden, great. Amazing, even. Okay, map token is not the same as making a 1/1, as we learned from the Drix. But it is good. And especially in the format where flying creatures were great, especially in the white-blue, you can generate a proper army in the air and win the games through that. Additional good value blue flyer was amazing. The ability to pump one of your other flyers, although I always got the land. But in theory, you could actually hit a non-creature spell, a non-land, of the top. Yeah, just great. 52.8% normalized win rate. And lots of the cards in the next group are going to be 52.8, 52.9. They're very close to each other. There is one common that is like head and shoulder above everything, but all of the ones are just between 52.8 and 53. Altic Cloud Guard, similar as Waterwind Scout, and a good pairing, like a good carve out in Lost Caverns of Ixalan was turn 3 Waterwind Scout, turn 4 Altic Cloud Guard, and you have the army. 3/2 flyer that makes a 1/1 ground creature when it enters, just perfect combination of bring a friend. Preferably you started your game with the Miner's Guidewing on turn 1. 1 mana, 1/1 flying vigilance. When it dies, target creature you control explores. And when you look at it, we can see this list of the cards, and you can see the cluster of 3 commons from Lost Caverns of Ixalan that just work so well together with each other. Miner's Guidewing on turn 1, maybe the Siren on turn 2, Waterwind Scout on turn 3, Altic Cloud Guard on turn 4, and your opponent is in trouble because you put good rate that is flying, and then you can deal with their big attacker on the ground, and all of a sudden you have a very solid army. And also the fact that Guidewing has vigilance is so good. Then we have the best zombie ever for 3 mana in blue at common. Sipsic Appraiser, 3 mana for a 2/1. When it enters, you look at the top 2 cards, and then you can put one of them in your hand, one in the graveyard. Graveyard synergies, card selection, body that can block something. Great card. And Cryogen Relic, which is the only card on that list that is not a removal spell or a creature. That's how good Cryogen Relic is. Best common of this format. We know what it does. When it enters, you draw a card. When it leaves, you draw a card. Maybe it can stun something. Superb card advantage engine for trinkety decks. Good on any spot on the curve. Good late, good early. Fantastic card. Torture Tower, super efficient removal. 1 mana, deals 2 to something, exiles it, or if you bargain it, it deals 3 and you scry. The exile clause is important. Constructed All-Star, played in so many decks over the last couple of years. Just a fantastic, efficient removal. This is basically today's version of Fatal Push, really. Then we have Savor. 2 mana for giving -2/-2 to a creature and create a food token. By the way, I mean, the art of Savor is just so good. This reflection of a scared squirrel in the eye of a snake. Amazing. -2/-2 is so much better than dealing 2 damage. And the fact that you create food in so many decks, it was so important. Again, in my favorite build around Builder's Talent, Savor was the premier removal in there because it killed something and it made a non-creature permanent, which could put some counters on something when I had the Builder's Talent online. Great card. I loved it. And then Throw from the Saddle, best removal from OTJ. 2 mana, bite something. And then if it's a mount, it gets permanent boost. Just amazing for that. Even at sorcery speed, it was just great. And then we go to the best common of the last 2 years. Novice Inspector. Time passes, years change, design philosophy changes. But Thraben Inspector is still the GOAT common. Nothing changes there. 53.5, that's like half a percentage point higher than the second thing on the list. Given that, their difference between second and like 10th is 0.2 percentage points. This is head and shoulders above everything else. Novice Inspector is just such a deceptively good card, and lots of beginner players don't understand. Like, what's the deal about this thing? Well, the deal with this thing is that it's 1 mana, and it's great at any stage of the game because, hey, later in the game you just get this menial body, but you also like cycle it for a card, which means that you have mana to cast the second spell maybe on that turn, and you dig deeper into whatever is going to help you win the game. But early in the game, it's just a 1/2 that will do some points of damage, and later will provide you with card value when you run out of the steam. Just fantastic value engine. But well, first thing to note is that 8 out of the 12 cards on the list were in Azorius colors. Part of it was because of the LCI Azorius domination, but part of it was just that there are good value commons in Azorius colors. 7 out of 12 with mana value lower than 3. So super cheap cards. And almost all of those cards are ultra efficient and good at any stage of the game. When you look at it, it's like Scurryfoot Late is fine. White Auracite is good at any stage of the game. Waterwind Scout will give you some value. Sipsic Appraiser will dig you to whatever the win condition you want. Novice Inspector, same thing. Saver and Throw from the Saddle. Saver is maybe like less amazing, but even in the late game, the fact that it's a -2/-2, it does help you, win a combat of 2 big creatures. And there were also not that many big creatures in that particular format, which made it significantly better to convert into the late game. So yeah, lots of those creatures are good at any stage of the game. And Cryogen Relic, as I mentioned, is the only non-creature, non-removal spell on the top 12 common list. Right. Then we have the best uncommons. And uncommons are currently the format-defining cards. And they combine the power and availability. Lots of the powerful uncommons right now are on the level of rares from a couple of years ago. And they are also promoted with a new pack structure because they go later, because there are more rares in the packs. So you will see quite a few of them during the draft because their alpha will be lower thanks to the number of rares in the pack. Okay, number 12, Dragoon's Lance. 2 mana, 2 objects. You get a 1/1, and you got an equipment that gives it +1/+0 and Knight and flying on your turn. And the 1/1 will eventually die, but the equipment most assuredly will remain forever and will be a threat. And this was such a groan test in the format. It's like, I'm playing my green value deck, opponent plays Dragoon's Lance on turn 2, and I know I'm in trouble. Because, yeah, I will deal with this first one, but then the next thing starts flying, and then the next, and then they play a couple of Gated Cats, and I'm dead all of a sudden. Thundering Broodwagon, 6 mana, Menace Reach. When it enters, destroy non-land permanent with mana value 4 or less. And you can crew it, and it becomes a 6/5 Menace Reach. The reach on that card was so unnecessary. And I'm saying that because I lost the game because I forgot that it has reach. That's why it's unnecessary, because it fooled me. Me, believe it or not. Still a great value card that, costs a lot of mana, but accrues so much value. And, you can cycle it and reanimate it in some ways in this format. So that's also great. Midnight Mayhem. 2 red-white, create 3 pieces of cardboard. And I think that I want you to notice how many of those cards will create multiple pieces of cardboard. Okay, make 3 1/1 gremlins. They gain Menace, Lifelink, and Haste until end of turn. So that's basically a 3/3 Haste Lifelinker with Menace. That next turn will still be a lot of bodies. Just great value card and a great finisher. Hunter's Talent. Now, this one doesn't make 2 pieces of cardboard, just 1. But it starts with Bite Spell. Then when you upgrade it, it gives something that you have +1/+0 and Trample. And that Trample was so oppressive with this card because like everything becomes a must block, and then you have to start trading with it. You cannot just chump it. It became a problem. And also the +1/+0 contributed to the level 3, which was that whenever at the end of step, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card. So if your creature survived the attacks, somehow you're going to get to draw extra cards per turn. And this is an easy way of drawing extra cards. You don't need to do anything fancy. You don't need to sink a lot of mana for it. But when the situation arises, you want to pay 4 mana to get an enchantment that basically makes you draw 2 cards a turn. Dreadwing Scavenger also doesn't make 2 bodies, but It enters and it loots. So you got a value up front. If they killed it, they spent the removal spell, and it's a 3-mana creature, so they spend probably a 2-3 mana removal spell on it. And a card, and you already got a loot, so you got some card selection. If it does survive, it will loot every turn, which will generate atrocious amounts of value. And at the same time, it's an evasive creature, so it can attack quite easily. Sheltered by Ghosts. What doesn't it do? Enchanted creature you control. When Sheltered Ghost enters, you exile some permanent until Sheltered by Ghost leaves the battlefield. And enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has lifelink and ward 2. Now, this card, I think, loses a bit of its power against better players because they will be able to blow you out on this one. But on Arena, it was just very strong and later converted to be constructed playable. So clearly, I made a small fortune selling those constructed players for like £2 a pop because I opened a ton of them in my boxes. Deep Cavern Bat, another uncommon that turned to be a constructed staple. 2-mana 2/2 flying lifelink. It steals a card from your opponent's hand. They can kill the bat to get the card back, but that means that they use the removal on a 2-drop 1/1 flyer. That probably pinged them already for 3 and gained you 3 life. Great value. And also, like most of the time, you just took a removal out of their hand. If they don't have a second removal, they have to dig into it to get the first one back. But sometimes you had those games when you had like an architect sort of pile of bats that were holding everything together. If one of them died, it all fell down like a house of cards. And obviously, it would be very bad in current format because fire magic exists. Outcaster Greenblade. 3-mana 1/2. When it enters, you get to search your library for a basic or a desert. And it gets +1/+1 for each desert you control, which means that it went really big, really fast, and also draw you a card when it enters. 3-mana, 3/4 that draws you a card is a good creature. So yeah, there you go. Vine Reap Mentor. Well, 2-mana 3/2. That's already a good rate. And when it enters or dies, you create a food token. So it creates multiple pieces of cardboard. As you can see, almost every card from the list either drew you a card when it enters or was like super efficient removal or created additional piece of cardboard. Spyglass Siren, talking about which, is number 3 on the list, 56% normalized win rate, which, by the way, is more than any common could achieve, basically. Blue, 1/1 flyer, makes a map token. Yeah, just very efficient card that makes extra cardboard and allows you to, start already aggressively and gain the momentum. In best of one, it's very important. Number 2, Imodane's Recruiter. This one doesn't do extra bodies on its face value, but it is 2 spells in one, so it's a natural 3/1. And also sometimes you just cast it and it gives everything haste and +1/+0, and it's just lethal. So yeah, great card, amazing card. It would be great to be able to cast Train the Troops and then Imodane Recruiter, but often just casting Imodane Recruiter was enough to completely win the game. So what is our top uncommon for the last couple of years? Zoetic Glyph. And also this is a natural 2/1 because it turns your artifact into a 5/4 creature, and then when they deal with it, that's 3-mana 5/4 with haste most of the time, but when they deal with it, it discovers 3, so it basically replaces itself. It draws you a spell and casts it, so yeah, makes multiple cardboard pieces. So 4 signposts on the list of the top 12 best uncommons, which is not that many, but also not that few. There's some super efficient removal on the list. Most cards are quite cheap. Most of them are fine at all stages of the game, but I think that the important part of those best uncommons are that most of them are aggro slanted. These are the cards that will give you the advantage in the early game by generating some value. I think the only proper mid-range card on the list is Thundering Broodwagon. Now, obviously, you can use Sheltered by Ghost and Deep Cavern Bat in the more controlling decks, but they also can be a part of the aggressive decks. But, Imodane's Recruiter, Zoetic Glyph, Spyglass Siren, Vine Reap Mentor, they will all be more on the aggressive side. And yes, Vine Reap Mentor might later lead to a grindier mid-range game, but itself being a 2 mana 3/2 that generates value is going to create pressure on the opponent and make sure that you're going to be, having the early advantage in the game. And I saw that early advantage in live totals is such an important thing when you want to start racing. Like often people cannot start racing because they're like 6 life behind from the early damage. And because of that, they have to play defensively. And because of that, they are more prone to the blowouts. And it all creates this kind of a pile. That's why I think that's why it's so important to play 2-drops, because these allow you to get that early advantage, the early momentum going. And because of that, you will make it harder for your opponent to stabilize and turn the corner. And some decks are just playing so badly on the defense scale that they will almost certainly lose if they have to go on the defense. And you are enabling that kind of play. Okay. Last, we have the bombs. Best cards in their formats, extreme outliers in terms of power. These are the cards that you see and you go like, oh. And 12 on the list with 60%. Like remember, the best uncommons were 56 at top. This one already starts at 60% normalized win rate. That's insane. Ureni, the song and ending. 8 mana, win the game. Flying, protection from white, protection from black. When it enters, it deals 10 X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and planeswalkers. Your opponent's control, where X is the number of lands you control, so normally at least 8, maybe 7. It just like completely obliterates their board while presenting with a threat that is super hard to kill because white and black are the colors that are most likely to be able to kill it. That's also a 10/10. And yes, it can be chumped, but it's a flyer, so not chumped eternally. Great top end for those Timur Dragon decks. Palani Hatcher, 5 mana, 5/3. Other dinosaurs you control have haste. When Palani Hatcher enters, you create 2 eggs. And then at the beginning of combat of your turn, you can convert an egg into a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token, which of course has haste. So you play it on turn 5, and basically you get a 3/3 haste dinosaur. Next turn, you get another 3/3 haste dinosaur and the 5/3 can also start attacking. You just generate so much board that the opponent will die very quickly. Dragonback Assault, Timur. So 3 and the Timur. For 6 mana, you get an enchantment that it enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, so clears a lot of the board. And then you get a landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you create a dragon that is a 4/4 with flying. So stabilizes the game and then gives you a tool to basically take it over. And especially when you had some dragon storms, you could also generate massive value by play a land, return thing to my hand, recast it, get the value, blah, blah, blah. Marang River Regent, another thing that stabilizes well. 6 mana, 6/7, which is huge. And then when it enters, you can bounce 2 things to their owner hands. And also, like, if you want to cast it earlier, you can just draw 3, discard a card for 4, and put it back into your library so that your opponent knows what's coming at some stage. Sabsunen, Luxa Embodied. 5 mana for a 6/6, reach, trample, indestructible. It can't attack or block unless it has an even number of counters on it, and at the beginning of your first main phase, put a counter on it. And then if it has odd number of counters on it, draw 2 cards. Like, this thing does everything. It just stabilizes the game. It's indestructible. You can't kill it, and draws you a bunch of cards, and then just kills the opponent. So, great card for the mana that you spent on it. Overlord of Mistmoors. 7 mana, 6/6, makes 2/1 flyers, and you can cast it for 4, and then it starts ticking until it turns into a creature after 4 turns. Again, 4 mana for 2/1 flyers is a great deal already. If you draw it late, you can just cast it already as a 6/6 and with the 2/1s. And when it attacks, it will make more 2/1s. So if they can't deal with it, it just generates so much value that they're dead. And 61% game and hand win rate. So yeah, it made them dead a lot. Ugin of the Storms, 7 mana, Planeswalker. When you cast it, exile something, so it already kills something on enter, so it generates that instant value. Again, look at all those cards, all of them instant value. And if not, they are super hard to kill. Like, maybe Sabsunen doesn't generate instant value, it will generate value soon, but it's just so hard to kill that it will generate that value eventually. Ugin also super hard to kill because it gets a +2, gains you life, draws a card, kills the best creature that they had. So yeah, super hard to deal with. And I played against this card maybe a couple of times, and I won once basically because flukily they couldn't kill my best permanent when they cast it, and I managed to kill it on the turn after it was cast by combat damage somehow, magically almost. Aklazot's Deepest Betrayal, 5 mana, flying lifelink. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card. If they can't, you draw a card. And whenever an opponent discards a land, you make a bat. And when it dies, it turns into a land, and you can just reanimate it and then make it alive again. So super hard to deal with, super hard to kill. And a very powerful creature on its own right, because it's like air elemental with lifelink is a big improvement, not to mention that it just shreds the opponent's hand, and if they don't have any, it just draws you cards. And maybe you get a couple of chump blockers in the process. So like tons of value on this card. Jeskai Revelation, 7 mana, but boy do you have value from that. So you remand the spell, you deal 4 damage to any target, you make 2 creatures that are actually decent, you draw 2 cards and you gain 4 life. Like what else do you want for 7 mana? So much value and everything up front, and also at instant speed, and also there is an ability of rebuying this card in this format quite a lot. Graph Triplets, 3/3 with Trample that makes 2 more 3/3s with Trample. When they die, they make each other bigger. Like, again, tons of value up front, and super hard to deal with, because what? You kill one, the other ones become huge. There were some ways of killing them to make them smaller, like the Candy Grapple, but not very easy to deal with it. Then the second most powerful rare in the last couple of years, Aurelia's Vindicator. And this one is like 4 mana, 4/2, flying lifelink, Ward 2. Ward 2 always important. But I think the more important part of it was the disguise, where you can play it as a morph, and you can flip it for 4 mana and X. And when you paid the X, that's how many cards you can exile from battlefield and from graveyards. So perfect world, you discard, you exile maybe 2 of opponent's cards and 2 cards from your graveyard. When Aurelia dies, those cards return to the battlefield, so you can actually reanimate 2 of your creatures, and their creatures come back, but you gain so much value already, and with your 4/2 life linking flyer. And the best card in the last years by quite a lot, 62.7, so a whole percentage points better than anything else. Bonehorde Dracosaur. This card just aligned with the format so well because it was super hard to kill. 5 mana, 5/5 flyer with first strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, you exile top 2 cards. You may play them. If you exile a land, you make a creature. If you exile a non-land, you make a treasure. That makes it easier to cast those spells. It just generates so much value that you can't deal with it, and also kills you in a jiffy. So all of that works together. So that's our top cards. And if you know, most of them were actually very expensive. So the top cards in the formats are not going to be the cheap ones. They have high mana value. Actually, mainly they were in Timor colors. And all of them are extremely hard to kill, either because they're just indestructible or can reanimate themselves or something, or because they align well with how the format removal was built up. And all of them will give you some value up front, with maybe minor exceptions of cards that are basically unkillable, like Sapsunen or Aklazots. But all of the rest ones are giving you amazing value up front and still an amazing body behind. So this is how you recognize true bombs in this format. They have to really do a lot up front. So yeah. All right. And that's the episode for this week. I will have to disappear into my coaching session, but hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully you looked at those different categories from different perspectives and were able to learn a bit about why do we undervalue the cards, why do we overvalue the cards, the importance of ignoring the cards with high ceiling and low floor and thinking more about the floor than about the ceiling, the importance of delivering value up front to be a good card in general. Hopefully all of those were useful for that. So thanks for that, and I'll see you next week when we're going to have the Skeleton Crew, a bit later, but it's because there's a weird release schedule for this format, and because we also have busy calendars. But Skeleton Crew, maybe it's going to be a skeleton crew, but we're going to make it because lots of people are also prepping for the Pro Tour. But we're going to make it, and we only have 5 archetypes to cover, so hopefully we can see that. So yeah, with that, I'll see you next week, and have fun exploring the new format, maybe with some of those lessons in your mind, and I'll see you next Monday.